Shabbat Shalom, friends. Please pity the poor clergy people who are charged with choosing something to speak about on this Parsha, on this Shabbat, when there is just a massive mountain range of things. Okay. But since we read from the first opening of the Parsha today, we needn't really look further than there to find great inspiration. So let's go there. Parshat Vayera opens with the scoff heard around the world. Now, of course, more accurately, this is translated as Sarah's laughter. Laughing at God. And of course, she wasn't the first. In the previous Parsha, Abraham does even more. He literally falls on his face, laughing at God. This notion of laughter, though their laughter is a little snide, a little doubting, it's still laughing at the joke that they believe is about to be played on them. And it is true, as was said by the immortal Dr. Tim Whatley in a Seinfeld episode of old, Jerry, it's our sense of humor that's allowed us to survive for 4,000 years. Jerry somewhat erroneously immediately corrects him and says 5,000 years. He says, 5,000, even better. In an episode where Jerry suspects Dr. Whatley of having converted to Judaism just to be able to tell the jokes. But without question, finding humor in difficult times is one of the strongest Jewish character traits. In 2016, Michael Krasny published a little book called Let There Be Laughter, a treasury of great Jewish humor and what it all means. With all due respect to Michael, I've read this book a couple times and I'm still not sure what it all means. But he does have some lovely insights. And he kind of encapsulates this whole idea of the Jewish sense of humor and the tension between it. He says, among a few other things, many Jewish jokes mourn loss, especially of language and culture, both having endured secular change and assimilation. But many jokes succeed in creating humor out of these and other losses. The most powerful of all maybe being the loss of belief, piety, ritual, and identity. Jewish humor highlights suffering and neurosis, but also emerges with deep, bellyful laughter. And much Jewish humor simply celebrates life. So-called, I don't like the expression still, but Jewish American, let's just say young girl jokes are often misogynistic, even anti-Semitic, but they also celebrate Jewish material success. That's one way of looking at it. Jews are portrayed in jokes as sometimes being very greedy, schmoes, and also as really poor schlemiels. Jewish jokes canonize Jewish mothers and Jewish grandmothers, but also display despair, impotence, and even rage about their supposed overprotectiveness and guilt-making. Sex and marriage are celebrated in Jewish jokes, but are also mercilessly ridiculed. That's true. Jewish jokes reveal profound feelings of chauvinism and chosenness, as well as deep feelings of inferiority and self-castigation. If ambivalence is the emotional currency of Jewish lives, then the humor of Jews embodies and even embraces it. Perhaps that explains why Jewish humor, he says, has become in many respects inseparable from American humor, and maybe in our global age, universal humor. A lot of Jewish jokes have crossed over to other nationalities and cultures and are indeed universal, or it's possible we borrowed from other folks. But paradoxically, many Jewish jokes stand utterly alone and cry out repeatedly with three simple words: we are unique. One of my absolutely favoritist funny Jewish men, and that's pretty steep competition, was Victor Borge. I, even thinking about him doing that Hungarian Rhapsody duet, even before the YouTube clip started, I was cracking up again. And I tell you, I needed it. If by chance you haven't seen that, as soon as you can, Victor Borge, Hungarian Rhapsody duet, you will fall off your chair, I think, laughing. It is the most delightful because he was so talented. He was a prodigy, gave his first public recital at the age of 8 on the piano, and only over time developed that incredible comedy routine. One of my delights was seeing my children watch him for the first time and just cry with laughter. What I love, so many things about him, we miss him, but thankfully we have him enshrined in video, was that in a wonderful video memorializing him, his children described him as being just that funny also at home. And that his approach to life when it came to providing comedy was that he felt that living, that the human condition was the most ridiculous thing that had ever happened. That it was just so absurd that we should find ourselves here on this planet with all of its craziness, and that it was absolutely, he felt, commanded to laugh at it all. So I do love the name of Michael's book, Let There Be Laughter. And in the pantheon of great, funny Jewish men, when my dad was in his last minutes of consciousness, he managed to tell me a joke. It was a silly little pun. He could barely speak at the time. And I said to him, "Oh, Daddy, you're so silly." And he took my hand and he said, "Honey, that's all we've got. That's all we've got." The philosophies of life of these funny men, that we have to laugh at it all, really sustains me in dark moments, because I know that many of you may be saying, "Now hold on a second, Rabbi Shana. There is a whole heck of a lot right now that is just not funny." And you're right. Especially, and we feel it so closely, for us Jews right now. There are words and threats and actions that feel so especially cutting right now, that make us feel small and laughed at. And it's sad, and it's scary, and it's hard to find the humor. It isn't okay how much we have to work and think and suffer. Should we come to synagogue? Should we be open? How armed should the guard be? How much publicity we should put on the internet, if at all? Should we meet at all? But this parsha reminds us that in a way, this Jewish story began with a joke. One, the laughter of which should still be echoing with us today. This week, we acknowledged Kristallnacht, now being called in many quarters the Reichspogromnacht, if I've said that correctly, but referring not to the night of broken glass or sort of romantic crystal night, but calling it what it was, 1938's pogrom against the Jews of Germany and the start of the Shoah. But great literature will help us find a way to look for the life sparks, even in the midst of the darkness. I read this little commentary a couple years ago. This is in the Plaut commentary, the Reform Movement Bible, and I recommend it highly. And there is a little commentary, actually, from Samson Raphael Hirsch, great Orthodox leader of the 19th century, credited with ushering in what we would call modern Orthodoxy in response to the Reform and conservative developments. And this little commentary, which spans 2 pages, it's kind of hard to see almost, caught my heart a couple of years ago. And I feel like this year, it's calling to me to share. Rabbi Hirsch wrote on Sarah's laughter. The entire beginning of the Jewish people is laughable. Its history, its expectations, its hopes. God waited with the foundation of this people until its forefather had reached a ridiculously high age. Therefore, God began the realization of his promise only after human hope had come to an end. For a people was about to be created that was to stand with its whole existence in contrast to all historical experience. Therefore, until today, those who in their short-sightedness deny God, this people must appear as the most ludicrous joke of all. The derisive laughter that has followed the Jew throughout history is the surest proof of the divine nature of its path. The Jew cannot be touched by this ridicule because from the beginning he has been prepared for it. Wry, joyous, self-deprecating, silly, cerebral, slapstick. It's all we've got, and it's absolutely what we need. You didn't think I'd leave you without a joke, did you? A Jewish man goes to see his psychiatrist and tells him that he had a dream the night before that the psychiatrist was his mother. Okay, the psychiatrist says, let's find out what it means. Tell me everything you did from the time you woke up this morning until the time you came here. Everything. And so the man begins. Well, let's see. First, I got out of bed. Then I showered and shaved, combed my hair, got dressed, went downstairs and had a donut. Whereupon the psychiatrist fired back at him, "You call that a breakfast?" Shabbat shalom.